Hi everybody, welcome to my latest video. Well, in this one I'm going to show you how to install the Artic Liquid Freezer 2 cooler. I've taken out my old cooler, which was, not the highest rated one. I won't go into that again. But this is one of the highest rated ones that there are today. So it's a little bit tricky in a couple of regards to install, and it's pretty easy in a few others. So I'll go through it step by step and try to give you as much graphic as I can to assist, and we'll see how it goes. At the end, I'll do the testing to see what the cooling looks like on this. So let's get started. Okay, once you've taken your Artic Liquid Freezer 2 360 out of its box, you will actually have it inside of plastic bags. There'll be two plastic bags, one that covers the pump unit and the hoses to the pump, and a second one that'll house the entire unit itself. All you have to do is remove these plastic bags. In addition to that, there is a bag with all of the screws, plates, and accessories, including a little tube of the actual MX5 from Arctic 5, one of the better quality thermal paste. So we'll be using that. Okay? Now, unfortunately, the way it came with the fans in this configuration, basically the air pushing down into the radiator, we're going to have to flip this around. What I mean is we're going to have to take these fans and we're going to have to flip them over, because I'm installing my radiator in the front of my case. If you're putting it at the top of your case, you can leave it like this. But if you're going into the front, it's usually best to have it blow in. The way it's configured right now, it would wind up blowing through the radiator and then out the front of the case, which makes it a challenge to keep the proper air pressure within the case itself. So let me go ahead and show you how to flip these fans over. Get this out of the way. Be very careful with the hoses. You don't want to bend them too hard in any one direction, because that will damage them and make them more likely to allow some of the fluid to slowly ease out. It's going to happen anyway, but if you bend these too far, you could damage them and it would increase that likelihood. So what I have here is my electric screwdriver. Let me reverse it. What I recommend is you take all the screws out, whatever order you want to do it in. Let's get them all out of here. Now I recommend you get yourself some nice wire cutters, diagonal wire cutters, and take out all of the little tie wraps that are holding all of these fan and RGB cables together. I've already done that. Here's an example of one of them. They're pretty small, so you gotta be very careful. Do not cut the wires. Once they are disconnected, then you can take the fans, and you gotta be very careful with this. I found that the best way to do it is to take the fans and push them upside down off to the side like this. Okay, so right now I put them up into the front. They're sitting here, and now I'm going to swing this around to get these cables to wrap around this part of the cooler where the hoses start out. I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to wrap it around. You got to turn the fans as we go. Okay? By doing that, you'll find it so much easier to get the fans back in place the proper way. So here we have it in this orientation. Be careful with the hoses. Okay, do not overly bend them, right? Now with it like this, take them and flip them all over, where you have the little suspension bracket that holds the motors of the fans in place. And you got to see these. By doing that, the air is going to come out this way, toward the camera in this case. And that's the orientation that you need. But now I have these wires all in a position that I can easily do it. Notice what happened here. I accidentally disconnected the main RGB connector. So I need to reconnect that. I'm going to go ahead and squeeze this over and wrap it around to the back side and connect it back up. They easily pop out. It's true about any RGB. Those are A-RGB, but that does not help the situation, believe me. So with that, we now have them in place. We're going to have to put some wire wraps later to get all this stuff nice and neat and cozy. But for now, I'm just going to re-secure the fans upside down from their original position. You're going to have to be very careful to make sure you don't pinch any of the wires as you do this. So we're going to have to put, I like to put, just like I took them all out, I like to put them all in before I tighten them. Make sure you get them into the screws and then just barely finger tighten them. There we go. Get them started with your fingers barely. Go ahead and do them all. There's no wires on this side here, so it makes it a lot easier. I'm doing that first. Okay. Make sure you get them into the screws and make sure that you don't cross thread them. Once I got these, I'm going to flip the entire thing around to my side. So I'm going to take this whole thing, careful with the hoses, and I'm going to flip it around this way. That way I can see what I'm doing here. Having a little extra light on this side does not hurt either. So now make sure that you don't pinch any of the wires. I do want to get this wire underneath on the other side of that screw. So I'm going to carefully position it after I go through the first hole, through the wire, and then into its connector at the bottom, the screw notch. That'll help get them started together, okay? But pretty much the rest of them, I'm just going to try to make sure I just don't pinch any of them. Very important. Do not pinch them inside of a screw. If you have to, get some extra light on the situation to make sure you don't get the wires wrong down in there. Get them all started. Looks good. Nothing is pinched. So now I will take a screwdriver, I'll reverse it with the same bit. You just have to hit this little thing here, and now it's screwing in the clockwise direction. So I can just go down the line. There we go. They're all done. Make sure none of the connectors came off. Remember, there's an RGB one all the way at this end over here that you got to be careful of. That popped off when I flipped the fans around, so we got to make sure it didn't pop off again. Now I'm going to go through and just do some more cable ties on here to get these down and secure. I won't go through all of that detail. Okay, I think I got it to the point where I'm happy with it. Those of you who've built a computer would know you could spend a lifetime doing cable management of any type, and you probably still won't be happy with it. I would say if you didn't accidentally cut a wire in the process of cutting off the little tails from the cable ties, consider it a success. So now we're ready to go. When I put this into the case, it's in the right orientation. It will go into the case this way. This will go onto the CPU. This will be in the front of the case. The hoses will go down to the bottom, and I believe I'll be able to get that done in this case. If there's a problem with that, I could also do it the other way. It's not optimal, but it will work. You'll wind up getting some noise in here, some gurgly noise, but that's not going to hurt anything. It still should last the 6 years of the warranty. Okay? So that takes care of preparing the cooler for installation. Okay, what I've done here is something I strongly suggest. Lay out all of the small components you're going to need. In this case, I have an Intel 1700 socket. There's a lot of extra components though, because it also supports this kit, the Intel 1200 and the AMD 4 and the AM5 sockets as well. So what you have here is the main bracket that goes on the back of the motherboard. You have these braces here and the two screws that hold down the pump to the CPU. You have these which will connect to the main bracket through the motherboard, and then you have these that actually top it off at the very top. In addition to that, we have over here the 4 screws. They're special screws too. That little collar, as the instructions will say, is to support this little thing here that looks like a little tire. This section here is the insulators, both sides of the motherboard, bottom and top. You have these little tire things. You've got 4 more insulators that are thicker than those that are also put in place. These are the 16 screws that hold radiator to the case, and these are washers that go along with those 16 screws. Make sure that for these double-edged spacers, when I mean double-edged, there's 2 threaded ends to it, that you use the ones that are 13 millimeters. That's from the size of the center part. That's what's needed for the 1700, okay? So now it's all laid out, and I'll be able to use this to put it together the way that I want. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is put these little rubber insulators on. There's a total of 8 of them, 4 that go on the back of the motherboard and 4 that go in the front. So you'll see, if you look carefully, 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Be careful though, because there's actual double holes in each one of these positions. For the 1700 socket, you have to use the outer one. So we have to take these off. We'll peel them off of the thing here and just stick it on one side, and we have to put them right in the spot that's the furthest away. So the hole that's furthest away is the one we want. So in this case, the one all the way to the top here. Push them down a little bit. They're going to probably shift a little bit once we put the other bolts through. So we'll go and do the other side. Push them down, and it should be close enough. Okay, so now we have to put the fins onto the pump. One goes here with a single screw, and the other one goes here. So they have to face with the opening on this facing down. So you can see it's sort of curved at both ends here. So it has to go like this. Here's the screw that it goes in, the long one. I'll get it started on this, just pushing it through the hole, and then it goes into this particular screw hole. Make sure the wires don't get pinched. Push it in here. Now it's going to take a while to screw this in. The threads are deep, so let's be patient. Screw that until it bottoms out. Okay, I'll hold it with my thumb so make sure it's up against it properly. Don't strip it. There we go. Now we'll do the other one here. Put the screw through, and we'll do it on the other side. There we go. It's done. I'm going to leave this protector on for now until I'm about to put this on, because I'm going to put this on after I install the radiator. So I don't want to be dealing with that getting in the way and me touching it by accident and putting fingers all over it. So I'll just leave it that way. I'll peel it off later, and I will still clean it one more time. Now let's prepare the back plate. We need the black back plate itself. This is the bottom of it, by the way, into the motherboard, that is, right over here, this notch. And then this part here is going to go onto the top of the motherboard. There are 4 of these special looking screws that have a collar on them. They don't actually have threads on them, except going into them. So they're more like little nuts. Okay, that's really what they really are. So you need 4 of those. You need 4 of these little rubber insulators. They look like little tires if you look carefully at them. They're rounded on all sides, but have a hole in the middle. So you have to make sure you have the back plate oriented right. You're going to see, if you look at it real carefully, that there is a dip in it. Right now it's pointing that way. So we want it pointing up as we do this work. So you're going to see a little ridge here and here, and we want the part that sticks up to go up. We stick in the distant hole, remember, like I did with the little other insulators, and we take one of these little rubber tires and we push it on top until we get all the way flat down. I'll show pictures of that as well from the manual, the online manual. Make sure you get it in the right hole though. This one actually went into the wrong hole. So we push it in here, we get it into the right hole, because there's 2 of them right next to each other. We push it in, and we push the rubber thing all the way down. So it has to look like that. With this, the part that goes against the motherboard, the part that's sticking in that direction just slightly. Now let's do all the other 3. So here they are, all flush, and they're pointing up, where the part is that you have threads on the inside. That's what's going to go against the motherboard. Okay, so this is prepared. Okay, now we're going to put the back plate on, but because it won't stay there by itself until we put screws at the other side, I'm going to use some masking tape to hold it in place. Safe masking tape that you would use for high-end painting. Okay, I'll take the back plate and I will push it down. And here's what the back of it looks like when it's installed properly. The key thing is to see these little dimples on the socket, the bottom end, that they're centered in these circles. If you don't put this opening to the bottom of the board, which is where that is right now, toward the bottom of the motherboard, then they will be actually pinched underneath the edges of it, both the bottom ones and the top ones. So you got to make sure that that's the case, that you can clearly see the entire dimples sticking through and not causing this thing to protrude any farther than it should be. So now I'll take some of this masking tape, take off a couple of decent sized strips, and put it onto the motherboard, holding the back plate on. So I'm going to make sure that it's sealed against the motherboard. It won't damage it. Don't worry about that part. We'll put one there, and we'll put another strip on the other side. We'll put it this way. This is a trick I always use when I'm doing this. Right, when the motherboard's inside the case, that is. If you can get it outside the case, you really don't need to do this. Okay, so now it's secured and I can flip it over. Okay, it's now been flipped over, and now I need these 4 pieces in order to secure the back plate. Okay, these are the 13mm ones. Make sure they're the longer ones that came in the kit. And very carefully, we just take them and screw them into the holes. Don't push too hard down, or you will actually knock the back plate off since it's only being held by tape. So be very careful in getting them, especially started. Get a couple of them started. I like to do the diagonal ones. If those little insulators we put on before are not centered right, this will make it a little more difficult, but you can work your way around it. They'll recenter in a moment. So let me finger tighten these guys, and I'll do the final tight before I put the pump on. Doesn't matter what side of those things, they have the same threads on both sides on those 13mm spacers. I like to alternate diagonally, get a nice even pressure on it. Okay, I take a quick look with a flashlight to make sure that they're level flush with the little insulators, and it looks like we're good. Okay, so now I can put this aside. Okay, let's get this guy installed. I got my electric screwdriver. I got 12 of these screws that came with the cooler and steel washers to them. So I'm going to mount it up in the front of this case. Let me try this first. I believe it'll work, but you never know until you try it, for sure. I'm going to get this guy like this. I believe I can still go around with this hoses around the GPU. But let's see what happens. Let me leave it like this, and let's get this guy up into place. I've already moved the hard drive on the bottom to give it a little more room. So hopefully that's just enough to be able to allow me to do it. What I should do is remove this hard drive case. There we go. A little bit better. Get this guy in here. There we go. I got it. So now I have it in here. Let's see, do I have clearance? I think I do. And then if I put this over, will I have clearance to go over the GPU? I believe I will. This is the ideal position to be in, where the hoses are going in to the radiator at the bottom. So that's why I'm doing it this way. It sort of follows Gamer's Nexus analysis, and might reduce the number of complaints I get from the people who are watching this. So let me get this ready to go. I'll start with a couple of screws in the middle here, and we'll see what happens. And then we're down to the last one here. Why is that not lined up? That'll be nice to be in the screw hole, that's why. Very Okay, it looks like they're all tight. Okay, so now we have it installed here. Turn this around, let's see what we got. And I think at this point, we can see if we have the clearance. Now, whether we have the clearance to the hard drive or not, if I decide to put another one, it's like it barely makes it. So if I had to, I could put another hard drive in there. But let me put the GPU back in and see what we get. I want to see if I can go around this GPU. I think I can, but you never know until you try it. So here's my 3080 from EVGA, my first 3080 that I had. Can I get this guy in there? Okay, it's in. Will this go around it? Yes, it will. I have plenty of clearance here. I'm going to go around it. So let me secure the GPU. So now it's in. And now we have to put this. I'm going to lie it down for that purpose. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do before I put the pump on, I'm going to clean the CPU off one more time with 99% isopropyl alcohol. I will also clean off the bottom of the pump after removing this with the same alcohol. Do close up the bottle again before you forget, and then it all evaporates because 99% goes very, very fast. Now I have to put the thermal paste. Now, some people may not like this, but I have found that when it comes to a Intel newer processor, that it should be spread in order to get the right filling to it. It's a little different consistency than the MX4. I think that's good enough. So I'm going to stick with that. Looks like a nice thin coat that spread pretty evenly. And now I'll place the pump down onto it, nice and evenly across all fours, and push it down evenly on top. And then I will use these 4 nuts to tighten the guy down. You do want to have it near the VRM, okay? So it keeps that cool. That's what that's meant for. Take a screwdriver, and I'll try to see if I can give him a little bit of a tip off here. And there we go. That should be it. So now this is in place. The hose is clearly clear, the GPU in this particular case, which is perfect because it's a nice deep one right over here, and we're good to go. Now, one thing I did, which I forgot to mention before, is I did tie, with a cable tie, the 2 cables over to this hose. So I'm taking that off now, so I loosen them up. I did that just to keep them out of the way. So what I'll do now is, I do have on this particular motherboard a CPU fan and a CPU fan option. I'm going to put the CPU fan as the one that'll control this. This is the fan connector. So this one will go into the CPU fan connector. It is PWM, and I understand that the pump on this thing is also PWM. I'll address the wires a little bit later, but at this point the fan is connected. Now the RGB, unfortunately there's no A-RGB up in this side of the motherboard, so I'm going to have to come around to the other side and plug it way over here. So I'm coming around the GPU, and I'm going to plug it in to the first A-RGB connector that I see way over here. There we go, it's in. And I'll dress the wires up a little bit better later. Looks like we're fully connected. I did connect the GPU auxiliary power here, the 2 connectors for this 3080. And at this point, we should be ready to go. Okay, before I do that though, I want to show what I didn't use. This came out of the Intel kit for this cooler, and that's the 4 shorter standoffs, double threaded on both sides, and 4 steel screws. Those are part of the other types of Intel ones that you could be installing this particular cooler on as well. Okay, it's all ready to go. Let me turn the power on first, see if it reacts to that at all. Oh, it did. I saw the light on the motherboard come up there, the green light. Okay, that's a good sign. I got the monitor on, so let me power this thing on and see what we got. Hit the power button. Whoa. Heard the beep. It did post, and there we go. ASUS is coming up. Well, right now it's got the default colors on the fans, right, including the fan cooler itself, right? Let me log in. There we go. We're up into Windows. And now it took on the colors that I had set before. That's the motherboard colors by the ASUS software that's loaded on this. So all the fans are working. But for this, I'm done for now. And I really wanted to show you just the install of the Artic Freezer 2, which, as you can see, there's some things that are easier and some things that are harder. But overall, I didn't find it that difficult at all, to be honest with you. And let's face it, the performance, it's hard to measure really, because the older cooler would max out at 100 degrees centigrade on many of the P cords. So you really couldn't tell, because once it hits that, it doesn't go any higher. It just slows the clock to keep it at that maximum temperature. But overall, in interpreting the results, and I'll put the chart up of the original one right now, and as you can see, this is the one that I had previous to it, the Intermex, and now I'll show you the Artic Freezer one. You'd have to really look at the details to it to interpret it properly. But my estimate is about a 20% improvement. Now, that may not sound a lot, but it could be more. I just have to interpret it based upon all of the factors. So what I did here is I'm going to put up a chart that also shows you the comparison between the two. So you can see the main three factors that I decided to look at. For example, what was the maximum average temperature of all the P cores? Also, the number of P cores that actually went redlined, those that actually went above 96 degrees centigrade. And by the way, none of these went to 100. The maximum I saw was, I think, a 99, maybe a 98, but they weren't any that were 100. And I also showed the overall performance numbers from Cinebench. So Cinebench had a score to it. As you can see, the score on this guy beat out the previous by a measurable amount. So hopefully it goes to show what we have. If you're interested in this, I'll put down in the comments below the links to where you could buy these. It just so happens that this is the 360. Well, the 420 is on sale right now on Amazon, so you can take a look at it. I'm probably going to order that for my next build. But I wanted to go ahead and show you how it gets installed, and hopefully that'll help you out if you decide to do it yourself. So till the next time, thanks for watching and take care.